Incon's mega big. I'm 8'6", baby. Google it. It's a Googleable fact, and everything on the internet is true. So don't you ever forget that. You know? Don't you ever forget that. All right. There's only mute and unmute. I don't know how loud that's going to be. It's going to be loud? That's not that loud. Okay. All right. You guys ready for the conversation of the day? That's right. The conversation of the day. Did I know it was going to be like this? No, I didn't. That's right, folks. We're talking about circumcision, Tylenol, and autism. The real trifecta, the real Illuminati. That's what they don't want you to know about, folks. So today, in that order, more like a hodgepodge, like you mix some beans and some rice together, threw some meat in there. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's get into truly one of the things that has ever been a thing. All right. Here we go. Quarter con.
Confirmation studies. There's 2 studies that show children who are circumcised early have double the rate of autism. It's highly likely because they're given Tylenol.
I want to say it like it is. Don't take Tylenol. Don't take it.
So, this is what we're talking about today. The start of this. This is our health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Also, constantly dresses up like it's Halloween, as his favorite creature, a zombie. He's always ready. So the statement that has been made is that those that are circumcised early have double the rate.
Circumcised early have double the rate of autism. It's highly likely because they're given Tylenol.
I want to say it like it is.
And we're gonna loop it back into Tylenol. And for those that didn't hear the quote the other day, the quote was, "We are going to do the studies to make the proof. We don't have the proof. We're going to do the studies to make the proof regarding Tylenol." So, starting off with things that you didn't think had to be said, we're going to start off at the absolute baseline, which is vaccines are good. Which used to be a thing that you could say without people unsubscribing, but is now a thing because everything has to be a thing now. Because everything, and there's the buy. Yep, there he goes. See? There it is. It's the end. It is what it is. The amount we are in the bad timeline. Fun fact, science is good. Lack of science is bad. Okay? Vaccines not only save lives, children, adults, your grandparents, the immunocompromised. They're also one of the best, if not literally the best, single thing that we have created in order to reduce pressure on the hospital system. One of the best things that was ever created from a standpoint of keeping people out of the hospital. Because if you can prevent X, Y, and Z from ever happening, it keeps systems from being overwhelmed, which is great. Because if you live in the United States, you know just how bad our medical system is. It's not great, folks. And one of the only things that we've done real good is vaccines. So bringing us up to our second thing regarding those. Unfortunately, vaccines have become political, which is certainly one of the things of all time. But Florida has now seen an 81% increase in whooping cough. So Florida really laxing the whole vaccines for children thing, vaccines for going to elementary school and all that. Just to be clear, whooping cough kills kids. Like if you're an adult and you get whooping cough, it's going to suck. I've had actually a friend that got whooping cough as an adult. And you know what? It did suck. But it kills infants. Like, bleh, do not pass go, do not collect $200. You just die as a 2-year-old. As do a lot of these things that we vaccinate against. A lot of them kill 2-year-olds, which is why we invented all of these things so that 2-year-olds could stop dying. It was something that we all used to agree on. We all used to agree. So yeah, Florida's kind of leading the way in the anti-vax movement right now. They're really going hard on removing the mandatory, particularly they're going for the school system stuff. Like pretty much every school system across the U.S. requires you to have your vaccination. You have to have your full vaccination card, basically, of all the vaccines you're supposed to have before you go into kindergarten and stuff. And so they're kind of our case study of what happens in 2025 when you just stop taking vaccines. Particularly, of course, amongst children, because, of course, all of these adults that are not vaccinating their children are, of course, vaccinated because they were vaccinated as a kid. So, they're just putting their kids at harm's way because, they have no stake in the game, of course. But a couple of things that we should really talk about regarding the vaccination of it all, the Tylenol of it all, the circumcision of it all, because we truly do live in the dumbest timeline. But it's the only timeline that we get, I think. I don't think you can jump timelines. Unless somebody's keeping that tech all to themselves. I don't think that we have that yet. So this is the best one that we've got for now. So we kind of just got to make it work since it's what we've got. So step 1, vaccines are good. You should get them. And your children should definitely get them. A lot of times what we hear regarding anti-vaxxers, particularly anti-vax parents, is that the government, the liberal media, doesn't get to tell me how to raise my children. But here's the deal. It's not telling you how to raise your children. It's simply keeping your children alive. You're actively making choices that, to be clear, can kill your kids. Like a very active choice to kill children. So what we should stop thinking about, parents' rights, and we should start thinking about children's rights, because what is actually more important? A parent's right to not vaccinate their kids, or the child's right to literally live? That shouldn't actually be a hard debate. You know what I'm saying? That shouldn't actually be a hard debate. Between a parent who goes, I don't wanna, and a child who goes, living would be pretty sick. That should be a really easy choice. Now, regarding the circumcision of it all I'm going to say on that is First of all, wow. First of all, wow. There's a lot of arguments against circumcision, but autism was not on my bingo card. Was not on my bingo card. Right off the bat on that front, the only thing I'm going to say is pretty well disregards half of the population regarding autism in girls. Just pretty much just blanket sweep, just kind of throws that entire thing under the rug, which is already typically less diagnosed in girls than boys, much like things like ADHD are diagnosed more in boys than girls. So it just kind of throws like half of society under the rug in terms of diagnostic right there. Third of all, regarding the Tylenol of it all, you're going to hear a lot of people tell you that there are studies that show causation. That is actually not true at all. There are several correlative studies. Correlative. There are no causative studies regarding it. But also, there are a great many a study. Most of the best, largest sample size studies that show, in fact, almost no correlation whatsoever. Now you're saying correlation is not causation? Now I'm really out of here. So one thing I think that really gets people confused as well regarding the scientific field is you can almost find a correlative study on anything about anything. And that doesn't mean necessarily that the science is bad. It's just that a lot of times these studies are very, very specific and very, very constrained and trying to find out one specific thing. Oftentimes you're talking about evidence in mice or animals in general. You're not even talking a human population. When you are talking human population, a lot of times you're talking small scale studies, 20 people, right? So it doesn't mean that the whole point of science is, this study gave us something to look into. And then you go to have 100 people replicate that study. And if 99 of people get an opposite result to that study, then as it turns out, something probably went wrong. Their sample size was too small, something went wrong when they were gathering the information together, whatever, right? But that's the whole point of science, is that you go, you look into it. If you find something cool, you investigate it further, and then you make further information and stuff like that, right? That's how it works. That's great. You have to have a replicative capability in order for it to be science, right? It's not just about once. It's about being able to do it over and over again and get consistent results. So regarding the autism of it all in the modern age, the thing that has been massively left out of the conversation, and this is something that, to be clear, we know, which is why there wasn't any massive investigation into Tylenol causing autism up until we entered our second era, our second 4 years of throw science out the window and run everything based off of vibes, is two major reasons that almost encapsulate the entire difference. It does not encapsulate 100% of the difference. But there are two major reasons why we have seen an increase in autism diagnoses that account for something around 9 out of 10 of the increase. So about 90% of the increase. One, and this is the major one, we have increased the range of diagnostics for autism. Autism basically used to be this one specific box. And we're talking like very, very high grade autism, right? Where you're talking like you need permanent help, right? We're talking like a debilitating form of autism, right? That used to basically be the only diagnosis, right? But now we have a spectrum of autism. We have lower levels and medium levels, and then that classic higher level that requires like around the clock care, right? But because we've expanded out what we consider autism, there's more people that fall into that bracket because we have increased. The bracket used to be this big. Now the bracket is this big. So a lot more people fit within that bracket. Makes sense, right? That is the major cause for the increase in autism. Not that there's anything causing a giant increase in cases. More so, we are diagnosing a wider array of symptoms into a autism spectrum. Levels of autism. Right? Your grandpa who really, really liked trains and who has $50,000 of model train sets and nobody's allowed to touch them, he still functions just fine, brother. He wakes up every morning, goes about his day, had his family, had his job. Motherfucker's got a little autism. You know what I'm saying? But back in his day, that was not within the diagnostic criteria. It was much more specific, right? So, that is the big one. The other one, and this is actually not to be discounted, but the other thing that is also occurring is that a lot of our how many people are autistic in the US is done by like various testings done by like school systems and stuff, where they basically take kids aside and then they run a series of tests to see if, maybe they're gonna need additional help, right? If they fall somewhere in the autism spectrum. There are various funding issues with this and that kind of stuff. But we used to test essentially every child that was going through these systems, right? You've got 150 kids over here. Basically, all 150 kids are going to get tested. Because of changes in the system, because of changes in funding, stuff like that, very few places are actually testing all of their kids. Instead, they're testing somewhere around like 30 to 50% of their kids. And more of those kids, percentally, it looks like are getting diagnosed with autism. Because the children that are getting tested are the ones that the people seeing them go, oh, they might fall somewhere on the autism spectrum. So they're basically taking 50% of the data out of the system because they're like, they don't really have any symptoms that would fall along this, so there's no reason to go through the whole process of testing them. We're just going to take these other, 40%, 30%, 50% of kids that look like maybe there could be something there, and we're going to test those kids. And because of that, you've lost this giant block of kids that are not autistic getting tested, which makes it look like from a percentage of testing of the kids, right? It looks like it's much higher. But in actuality, they've just taken out a bunch of the sample size that they knew was not going to be along that spectrum for the sake of efficiency. So those two things combined account for almost all of the increase in autism in the United States over the past several decades. There is a small amount that it does not account for. Could be something. Could be a combination of several factors. Probably most likely is, right? It's probably not one thing that's accounting for the last little bit. It's probably a variety of things. But the vast majority of this increase, we know why it's happening. And almost all of it is just artificial guidelines of how we diagnose autism, the way we go about diagnosing it, and what is condensed within those parameters. And that is basically the conversation. But how does this explain the circumcisions? The argument for the circumcisions was that boys were more likely to have autism because they're circumcised, and after they're circumcised, they're given Tylenol. That was the argument, which really comes down to the fact that we are much better at diagnosing little boys with autism than we are at diagnosing little girls. There has always been a very big gap between those. We're getting better at diagnosing girls with autism, the same way we're getting better at diagnosing ADHD in girls and stuff. But for a very long time, up until extremely recently, most sciences were basically done, and most sciences were basically learned through men, specifically white men, in almost all things. It wasn't until something like 15 years ago that they made like the first female crash dummy to see how women would interact in car crashes with the seatbelt compared to men, with body changes, with your breasts and the hips and everything, and how it interacts with the seatbelt and how you crash and all that stuff. A lot of that stuff, we just haven't involved women in the baseline studies. And for a lot of stuff, they still don't get involved in baseline studies, which means that you almost always get evidence for men first, which is helpful, but not necessarily helpful for women who might have a different reaction because of hormones and all sorts of stuff, right? Particularly for like medications and stuff, which is a different conversation, but is related to the topic. But that, guys, is our conversation of the day. I never know what our end of stream conversation is going to be. Sometimes it's just going to be something I was thinking about for the day. Sometimes it's just going to be responding to whatever stupid thing happened yesterday and talking about what it means and if any of it is accurate. Because it is important. It's important that information is discounted when it isn't true. It's important to talk about subjects that affect real life people. In this case, particularly the autistic community. Having incorrect information spread about them doesn't help anybody. As there is incorrect information spread about a lot of people. Oftentimes purposefully, sometimes entirely on accident. And with these conversations, hopefully it also gives you something to talk to a friend about, a family member about, and gives you some ways to maybe push back on somebody that's getting, too much information from AI posts on Facebook and, taking those into their kitchen table discussions. But have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. I love each and every one of you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, folks, have a twitchin' day, y'all, and a twitchin' weekend.